Medicine Hat College is committed to growing a vibrant future for our learners and our region. Part of that commitment is providing opportunities for education and partnership, not just in the classroom, but in the communities we serve to increase our understanding of the world around us. Sustainability is an important part of our collective future. Tune in as we explore the health of our communities, environment, and economy through a sustainability lens.
Medicine Hat Community Housing Society is a not-for-profit organization that has two core mandates. First and foremost, we are what's known as a housing management body that oversees social and affordable housing in Medicine Hat and Redcliffe. And the second part of what we do is actually what's called a community-based organization or community entity that oversees homeless initiatives in our community. Affordable housing, by definition, is looking at spending no more than 30% of your income on your housing costs. In various communities, that's a standard definition and a federal definition. We know that in various communities that sometimes doesn't always work when we have individuals in market housing right now, meaning units that you or I might rent or purchase. We're likely paying more than 30% of our income to maintain that housing. But overall, affordable housing is the ability to live independently without having to receive subsidy on top of that. So when we look at housing in Medicine Hat, our approach is always to look at housing as a fundamental human right. It's in the UN Declaration, it's one of our core bases. It is the foundation for good civil society. When we say home is where one starts from, we mean it. So people have a hard time progressing and improving their lives when they don't have a roof over their head and they're forced to sleep on the street. So affordable housing is necessary in any community to ensure that every individual and every citizen has housing and has access to stable housing. That affordable housing needs to meet certain criteria. We need to have different affordable housing options available based on cultural components, based on family size, based on geographic location and proximity to services in your community as well. Without the ability for people to be housed and stable in their housing, they cannot be as fulsome actors in their community and their environment. So when we look at the environmental impact of not having access to affordable housing, we take that from a few different perspectives. When we don't have access to affordable housing, you have individuals that are obviously outside, disrupting spaces sometimes out of sheer necessity. So whether that's in parks, benches, vestibules and banks, and other places as well. So when we look at that from an environmental standpoint, we also have people that have to use the outdoors as their facilities now, where they don't have anywhere to go to the washroom or to access those resources either. So you have that contamination standpoint as well, whether that's just through defecation or urination in public spaces as well, which doesn't get talked about a lot. And so it's about the access to housing will alleviate that for those individuals and also just create better, healthier environments for people that are in parks and recreational spaces as well. So when we talk about environment, I think it's important to talk about that as well. It's also where they strew their belongings about as well. Their belongings do get disruptive when the encampments are taken down or disrupted from other individuals as well. And then we talk about creating safe environments from a public standpoint. It's very intimidating when you go into a park and there's someone sleeping in the park, or there's someone that's having a mental health crisis that is yelling. That can't be consoled or that police have to respond to as well. So I think that's another important element when we talk about the environmental standpoint and community wellness standpoint as well. When we get people into housing, those issues do alleviate. Sometimes those issues migrate to their own housing, whether it's inside or outside if they have a yard. But that's where caseworkers come in or support workers can come in and actually help them mitigate some of that stuff. It's often challenging for people that haven't had a roof over their head for quite some time to acclimatize to being indoors and to know how to work a stove and to know how to clean a toilet. So it's things that we maybe will take for granted, as much as it should be a basic life skill. If you've never had that upbringing or if you've never been fortunate enough to keep a roof over your head for long periods of time, you lose that skill. Affordable housing in Medicine Hat is at an all-time high right now. We are seeing increased rates of homelessness and increased rates of homelessness and first-time experience of homelessness from individuals that are low-income and working families and individuals right now. So it's something that we haven't historically seen at these rates. We also see a number of individuals that are sleeping outside right now or sleeping rough, and utilizing emergency shelters. Again, it's the highest rate it's been in the 11 years that I've been here in Medicine Hat. So we can attribute that to a couple different things, and one of them being affordability. So in terms of housing affordability is one issue, but we also have affordability in the cost of living, whether that's food, electrical bills, and heating costs. In Medicine Hat, we released our housing strategy in the fall of 2021, and that was a partnership between many different housing partners and agencies and community. Is a really collaborative document environment, and that strategy identified that about 30% of the households in Medicine Hat were in core housing need, and that they were low-income individuals that were spending 40 to 50% of their income on rent. So when we look at the housing need in Medicine Hat, it's determined that we need about 2,800 rental units. From a feasibility standpoint, that's not feasible to create 2,800 units in a very short time frame. So the goal within that strategy is to create 60 new units of new rental accommodation that would attune to those low-income families and individuals to actually just help get a handle on the housing crisis right now. The social hardships that people face when they have housing affordability issues are vast and quite detrimental to the family or that individual, whether that's on children's grades and education, which has a huge impact on food security, their employability and their ability to maintain employment as well. When we look at it from a just strictly social or health standpoint, we see increased rates of mental health in community. We see increased rates of pressure and suicide in our community. Whether we have business owners or people that are already living in poverty, everyone's been impacted by affordability in our community. There are huge misconceptions about housing and homelessness in our community in every jurisdiction, quite frankly. A lot of that is around people's own experiences. A lot of that is around misinformation as well. What people see from a visual standpoint versus understanding the data and evidence and kind of the programs and services available. So I think we do have a responsibility to educate and to communicate out. It's also not our jobs to convince people to think otherwise or that they have to take a certain perspective or viewpoint. It's always our job and our responsibility to share information and data in a way that makes sense for people to consume it and then to draw their own conclusions. I always think when we challenge people's thinking, it will always bring about new perspectives and ways of doing business. And some of the best ideas are from people that maybe did agree with what we had to say, where they actually brought up some really relevant ideas and concepts that we could actually run with, and then they become part of the huge solution, not just for us, but for community as a whole, because when you create healthy communities, everyone betters from that and everyone benefits from it. Some of the misconceptions around homelessness that we see is that every individual experience is an addict, is an alcoholic, criminals. Criminality is probably the number one thing we hear of individuals experiencing homelessness. The stigma that is attached to individuals that are experiencing homelessness based solely on their lack of housing. We say that housing is not a defining attribute, and where one lives should never be a defining attribute about what type of person they are. That's always someone's sibling or parent or child that we see on the streets. We also see the prevalence of mental health and addiction in our community, which is true. It's just not true of everyone. So it's really separating out the behaviors from the housing status of someone. So it's about the ability to have difficult conversations and to bring light to and shine light on certain things and elements and have that kind of go forward and make change and difference as we go. Some of the other misconception is that, social housing is substandard. It's definitely not substandard. Another myth is that housing is made free for everyone. Individuals that participate in any of our programs and services are required to contribute to their rent. We do not 100% pay for anyone's rent. They need to pay their utilities, they need to pay their rent, they need to meet with their caseworkers as well. So it's not that individuals come in and demand a place. Choice is always a huge component of it. We want individuals to have choice in where they live within reason, based on their available income and what they need for a unit. We know that when people have choice, they tend to keep better care of their property and respect that place a little bit more because it was not just somewhere that they were placed, it's somewhere that they chose to live. And so with that comes responsibility as well, which is part of the program's role and the case manager's role. So the approach of our services in Medicine Hat from a homeless serving standpoint is based on a housing first philosophy, meaning we meet people where they're at, we get them housing first, and then provide those wraparound supports to help them maintain their housing. That approach is long-standing, it is evidence-based. Medicine Hat's known for its use of data and using data to help inform all of our practices, whether that's practices that we need to continue to do or that we need to stop doing as well, because that data does shift over time. So with that approach, that is the basis of what we do. In community right now, we don't have a dedicated Housing First program because the individuals that we serve and their level of need has evolved or has actually diminished in some areas as well. So in our community, one of the first communities that no longer has a Housing First program, but we still offer it from a philosophical standpoint. Some of the homeless initiatives that we have, it's based on our service delivery plan and our plan to end homelessness. So as a community-based organization, we receive funding from both the provincial and federal government and receive approximately $4 million each year to invest into community programs and services. So when we look at the various programs and services that we fund from a community-based organization perspective, we fund 15 different programs and services in our community. That ranges from permanent supportive housing to employment programs and cash employment programs, and span between youth and senior services. So affordable housing is determined by what's known as core need income threshold. So every year the provincial government sets out what is a core need income threshold, and that is the amount of money, the maximum amount of money you can make based on the number of bedrooms that you need. And if you fall at or below that, you're determined to be in core housing need, which means you should be eligible for affordable housing. So since the onset of our plan to end homelessness in Medicine Hat in 2009, through our initiatives, we've been able to help 1,675 unique individuals to either maintain their housing or to go from a state of homelessness into housing. And of that is just over 400 children. That's just on our homeless serving side. Within our homeless serving side, we have a really great program called Housing Loss Prevention Program that is operated out of Housing Link. And that is strictly for individuals that actually have current housing and have a notice to vacate or an eviction notice, whether it's due to affordability issue or rental arrears or something's happened in their life, whether that's a medical condition, they lost their job. So our goal is always to keep people in their housing and support them versus have them spiral down into a state of homelessness where we have to do that work to actually get them rehoused and supported if they've had stable tenancy there. When we look at our social housing and affordable housing side of the work that we do, we have over 500 units, physical units, and then we also offer rental supplements to over 300 households every month. And we still have a wait list of just under 400 households that are needing affordable housing in our community. One of the foundational principles that we use when we are looking at our systems and our strategies is always to engage with those that are on the receiving end of our services. So we are always engaging with individuals with lived experience or that have had lived experience or are currently homeless actually. So we don't do anything, whether it's a programming perspective or new program delivery or a change in program, until we've actually talked to the individuals that are impacted by our services. So we have a number of new programs and services coming out, paralegal services, a hostel we have coming down the pipe as well very soon, which we're excited about. And that's done not from us sitting behind a desk and looking at data, that's from us going out and talking to individuals and saying, what do you actually need and what would be helpful in your housing journey. We look at those types of things, and we'll always have people with lived experience at the forefront of our conversations and leading the conversations. Without that input, we are doing something very wrong. Good strategies on ending homelessness are readily available across Canada and across the world as well. So I think about Finland and the work that the government does there. They buy units that are on the private market and turn them into social and affordable housing for their residents. They have a housing first philosophy and programs throughout their country where the rates of homelessness are at an all-time low, and it's the only country in that region that actually sees significant decreases in the number of people experiencing homelessness. We take housing first from the UK and from the United States. We see some good work happening with veterans homelessness across Canada and the States as well. I think about our fellow 7 cities on housing and homelessness and the great work happening in Alberta. I think what people don't know is Alberta is a leader across the world in ending homelessness because of our coordinated responses. So the responses that you see here in Medicine Hat maybe weren't developed here in Medicine Hat necessarily, but we're always in conjunction with our 7 cities partners. So whether that's out of Edmonton or Grand Prairie or Red Deer, Calgary, Wood Buffalo or Lethbridge, you'll find similarities in approach and philosophy and how we use data to actually make really good evidence-informed decisions. What you're going to find different is the nuance of each community and where that funding is invested. But overall, I would have to say Alberta by far is the standout across the world in terms of a kind of large-scale focus on ending homelessness. I think for individuals to help and community to help with this initiative, and whether it's affordable housing or homelessness, first and foremost to check our biases. For those that are experiencing homelessness or maybe struggling with housing instability right now, to come at it from a place of compassion. You don't need to understand it, but at least approach it with some level of compassion. Individuals don't wake up one day and say, today's the day I'm going to be homeless. Yes, sometimes it's by choice, and by choices that they make that lead them to that state, but it's never a conscious choice where people want to get to when they're sleeping on a street somewhere. I think as community members that sometimes invest and donate, please check that out. Look at the outcomes of programs and how effective they are. Your dollar can go a really long way and it can go a very short way. So look at programs and services that have shown to be effective. Ask to see the financials. Ask to look at their program outcomes so that you're investing in something that is actually making a difference, not just getting the name of an organization out there. From a community builder standpoint and leadership standpoint, speak up. Advocate for the need for affordable housing. For the developers and business community, keep advocating for change. Even if it's against certain locations of shelters or businesses or services, that voice is so important at the table because it helps us look at land use bylaws differently and look at the overall need of the community. So it's always a balance of balancing out the needs of the service providers that are there to serve those individuals that need the services and the overall community as a whole. So we have to have those disruptive conversations where we actually balance it out so not everybody loses. Not everyone can win in the conversation, but not everyone has to lose in the conversation either. When you see an individual struggling, reach out for help as soon as you can. Whether that's they got a notice to vacate, lost their job, or are struggling, the quicker we can intervene or other programs and services can intervene, the more stable that family and sometimes the children. Can't say enough about the schools and their referral early on when they see kids struggling. Kids are a really good indicator of a family struggle, so that tie into schools is really important as well. I think when envisioning a future of sustainable housing, I think it's adequate housing. I think there is housing options available for individuals based on what their needs are, not what is just developers or ourselves are willing to provide to them. That factors in the cultural component and family sizes and how people are choosing to want to live as well, and having those basic needs met in terms of not just a shelter but to create a home. So I think when we talk about affordable housing, I can't talk about it in the absence of creating a sense of belonging in our community, because that makes home for people, and then when people have home, they always thrive.
Learn, partner, and grow with us. Visit mhc.ab.ca/ourfuture to learn more.